Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from the Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. I'm always grateful. Just to remind you that we've got Mindspeak this Saturday with the central bank governor. Now of the year, he received this prestigious award from the African Development Bank. Sub-Saharan African, I imagine, Central Banker of the Year. Thoroughly deserved. He's very Sun Tzu, erudite, extremely interesting man. I told you I did this interview, which is on the website, and covered so many things. My favourite intervention of his was when he first started out. He goes for this run, and he talks about jasmine in the air and bougainvillea, really quite lyrical. The role of the auditor is a short clip we have from our interview. Internet is like wildfire, very interesting points in that little clip. So we serve breakfast from 9:30 at the Intercontinental. We start at 10. This is on Saturday morning. Japanese Prime Minister Abe has warned G7 leaders of Lehman magnitude crisis. Indeed, I don't think he's wrong. Hope thoughts mankind, not only animal that laughs, cries, thinks, feels, and loves. This is a photo by Laurent Bayer, and it's a photograph of a herd of elephants. I love elephants. I go all over the place looking for them. Probably the best documentary I've ever seen. I think I told you it was about these elephants, Mount Kilimanjaro in that area, and slowly the farmland was encroaching on their space. But what was really stunning was they keep coming back month after month. They follow the same trail. If one of the elephants had died, they'd mourn that elephant. They would go back and stroke the skull normally. And it reminded me of how, we all mourn our dead. And I, of course, like going to the Kabristan where my mother's buried. That's the cemetery in Mombasa. And it's just so powerful. It's called the Elephants of Kilimanjaro or something. I believe in the complexity of the human story, Chinua Achebe. I wasn't the least interested in the vices of my friends, but in their intelligence, Ezra Pound. It was a real pleasure catching up with Nick Clark of Al Jazeera and much more last night. We had dinner together. Nick, last time I saw him in person was when I was in Doha in 2011. He reminded me of that, and he's doing great things, and he's cast on a new great career. And I'm very excited for him, and it was great company and very, very good fun. He's written a piece, 23rd of May. Part of the reason he's visiting here, Parliament for the Environment kicks off in Nairobi. China to send nuclear-armed submarines into the Pacific amid tensions with the US. The Chinese military is poised to send submarines armed with nuclear missiles into the Pacific Ocean for the first time, arguing that the new weapon systems have so undermined Beijing's existing deterrent force that it has been left with no alternative. The Chinese point to plans unveiled in March to station the US THAAD anti-ballistic system in South Korea. You remember I talked about this, saying it wasn't really pointed at North Korea, it was also at China. And the development of hypersonic glide missiles potentially capable of hitting China less than an hour after launch as huge threats to the effectiveness of its land-based deterrent force. A recent Pentagon report to Congress predicted that China will probably conduct its first nuclear deterrence patrol sometime in 2016. I said at some point throwing matches at the tinderbox causes a fire. I think there will be a showdown, and all this pussyfooting around will end. Modelling what that showdown looks like is not very easy. US nuclear force still uses floppy disks, apparently. Saudi Arabia has a plan B to try to stop Iran's economic rise. Interesting piece. Saudi Arabia couldn't stop the Iran nuclear deal from being signed. Plan B is to limit Iran's ability to reap its benefits. The kingdom is mobilizing its Gulf allies to make sure that more than 4 months after the lifting of sanctions on the Islamic Republic, Iran's opening up to the global economy doesn't go smoothly. Last month, the Saudis scuttled a bid to stabilize crude prices because it would have allowed their bitter foe to grab a larger share of oil markets. And in Dubai, once their main gateway to the world, Iranian businessmen privately complained of increasing restrictions The Saudis are applying pressure on Iran wherever they're able to do so. Shashank Joshi. It's a rearguard action by the Saudis as the US reassesses its role in the Middle East. European banks are still reluctant to do business. That's primarily because they're worried about possible US sanctions. That's been something that's held a lot of people back so far. Talking about Dubai, Times Aerospace, a UK-based company that organizes events in Dubai, cancelled its aviation Iran gathering this year because of political tension. There are a lot of sensitivities at the moment with Iran in the Gulf. Mark Brown said in an interview, "We recognize that it's inappropriate at this moment to hold an Iran-related event." Saudi Arabia is also using oil as a weapon against Iran. Oil policy was one of the instruments. The other thing is to counter Iranian investment in the region under King Salman. It has become a clear-cut policy. There is no hesitation. I did not appreciate the lens through which Saudi Arabia and the GCC are viewing Iran until I got to Doha. They see Iran as plain nefarious and their influence everywhere, malignant influence. Third from left is Dr. Abdullah Khalifa al-Sheiji, and I missed this particular seminar, which was about Gulf security, but from various reports of other participants, one of whom had gone there was an open shouting match. This doctor called for confrontation and not dialogue with Iran. Pretty much that was the mood. If you didn't read my piece, which is Qatar punching beyond its size, please have a look. They're just issuing $9 billion of Eurobonds, and they're always ahead of the curve and rather nimble. I'll put up a photograph of the Emir of Qatar, the new young Emir, and President Ashraf Ghani. And also a comparison of Saudi Arabia's GDP versus Iranian GDP. That's from Holger Scheipitz. ISIS in Iraq, citizens trapped in Fallujah fear destruction of the city as government forces advance. Fighting force of some 20,000 Iraqi soldiers, special forces, interior ministry troops, tribal fighters, militia groups known as the Hashd al-Shabi, and an uncertain number of US advisors are tightening the siege of Fallujah. ISIS is estimated to have some 900 fighters in the town who are experienced in street fighting using not only snipers but IEDs, booby traps, mortar teams and suicide bombers. Commonly dig a warren of underground tunnels so that they remain hidden or suddenly appear behind enemy forces. What is not known is whether ISIS will make a last stand in Fallujah, sacrificing experienced fighters, or withdraw at the last moment, having inflicted maximum casualties on the other side. Though it has lost Ramadi in Iraq, Palmyra in Syria, and a string of towns and villages over the past year, ISIS has generally tried to preserve its fighters and heavy equipment. Going back to that point we were making about how nefarious GCC and Saudi see Iranian influence, I would have thought that Fallujah remains a dagger pointed at the heart of the Shia government in Iraq, which is now largely seen as being sponsored by Iran. Therefore, the Qataris, the Saudis might be reluctant to allow ISIS to suffer a defeat. Fallujah has had a long history. Under the Ottoman Empire, Fallujah was a minor stop on one of the country's main roads found in the city and the surrounding villages. In the spring of 1920, the British, who had gained control of Iraq after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, sent Lieutenant Colonel Gerard Leachman, a renowned explorer and a senior colonial officer, to meet with the local leader Sheikh Dari. Perhaps to forgive a loan given to the Sheikh. Exactly what happened depends on the source. But according to the Arab version, Gerard Leachman was betrayed by the Sheikh, who had his two sons shoot him in the legs, then behead him by the sword. Under Saddam Hussein, who ruled Iraq from 1979 to 2003, Fallujah became to be an important area of support for the regime. These are die-hard Ba'athists, that's where they are, along with the rest of the region labeled by the US military as the Sunni Triangle. During the Gulf War, Fallujah suffered one of the highest tolls of civilian casualties. March 2004, Iraqi insurgents in Fallujah ambushed a convoy containing 4 American private military contractors from Blackwater who were conducting delivery for food caterers. The 4 armed contractors, dragged from their cars, beaten and set on fire. Charred corpses were then dragged through the streets before being hung from a bridge spanning the Euphrates River. This bridge is unofficially referred to as Blackwater Bridge. This led to an abortive US operation to recapture control of the city, Operation Vigilant Resolve, a successful recapture operation in the city in November 2004. Huge losses, 95 American troops were killed, 560 wounded, 1,350 insurgent fighters were killed. So we're probably back to the scale that we were then. Let's move on to the currency markets, lots going on. Euro dollar, 111.80, dollar index 95.26, Japanese yen 110, the figure, Swissy 0.9914. The pound has hit a year's high, its last trading at 147.05. Aussie probably on the bounce as well again, 0.7216. Indian rupee 67.245, South Korean won 11.8164, the real 358.25. Egyptian pound 887.55, South African rand 1561.65. Dollar index I'll put up a 3-month chart, and it's been well supported lately, except for the last 2 sessions, but it's interest rate expectations that are supporting euro dollar. We've been on a weak run, but that's all about the fact that interest rates are not supportive. Commodity markets, Brent crude oil above $50 for the first time in 6 months. All the shorts, including me, have been squeezed right out of it. It's carried on going, which is its habit. It looks to me very overpriced, but I think we've just had more and more supply side bad news. Nigeria, Chevron facility, Canada, Libya, and much more. And that sort of allowed the bulls to take control of the narrative and send the price higher. How long they can keep that up, I don't know. Gold, that's been on a weak trend. It's had a little rebound from the lows yesterday, last trading 12.28. Sub-Saharan Africa, banks that lured diamond to Africa stumble as economies wilt. 2 years ago, the Africa Rising story was probably overblown. Those investors with hot money have been disappointed and are withdrawing. Financial stability risks have risen across all sub-Saharan Africa, said Rencap's head of research in Nigeria. Slowdown in China, commodity price rout, energy shortfall are combining to change the playing field. Add depreciating currencies, widening government budget shortfalls, and the outlook dims. The International Monetary Fund cut its 2016 growth forecast by 1 percentage point to 3%. I think that's going to be tough as well. The market's most risk are those with highly concentrated sector loans, for example, the oil and gas sector in Nigeria. Continent's larger banks also aren't standing still. Morocco's Attijariya Bank is eyeing Kenya, Ethiopia, Nigeria. Banks from South Africa, which hold more capital than regulators require, also looking for potential targets. Initially, African banks with stronger balance sheets will be able to benefit. However, investors from China, the Gulf, and other Asian countries, such as India and Japan, will certainly seek to enter new markets, and I certainly sense an appetite when I was in Qatar to expand their engagement with Africa. Continent's growth story isn't over. According to Exotics' Gadia, it has a young and growing population of 1.1 billion. Commodity cycles turn. The price of oil has jumped 85% from a 12-year low earlier this year. The dedicated money is still in Africa. The opportunity remains. It's still underpenetrated with fairly fast-growing economies. People forget what a frontier market really is. You've got to realize there are risks and structural challenges in cycles. South African oil share up 5.97% so far this year. Dollar rand, when I looked last, 15.58. Egyptian EGX 30 up 7.67% so far this year. Interesting Bloomberg View editorial about Nigeria needing prices that work. That's what we've been saying for a while. Nigeria took a step toward economic sanity Tuesday by announcing plans to let its currency weaken. Africa's largest economy is facing recession. Exchange rate flexibility will help it cope. For best effect, those plans should also include junking the FX controls that have blighted its businesses and scared off foreign investors, which is what I've been saying for quite a while. Nigerian oil share surged 3.78% yesterday to cut its year-to-date loss to 1.33%. Ghana Stock Exchange down 11.18%. Could Angola's first banana exports in 40 years save its economy? talking about Angola, which is now making exports of bananas. Yellow fever epidemic threatens to spread from Angola to China. This is infection control. Interesting story and mapping how it's moving around. I was at the doctor today and heard a huge crowd running down the street. And these days, we have regular street events once a week, every Monday. And they've got rather unruly, so I was quite curious to see what was happening. And then I realized that the president who'd gone to the UN function earlier had stopped his vehicle, stopped his motorcade, and was speaking directly. And it was actually not too far from where I was. So I walked down and I took this photograph. Just as he was getting back in the car, President Kenyatta goes impromptu in Parklands, I tweeted. And I said it was a smart move by the president to show he has equity and leverage in the street as well. It counters the street protests by CORD, who've seemingly taken over the street, and took me back to Paul Virilio, which I've mentioned countless times. The revolutionary contingent attains its ideal form not in the place of production, but in the street. That's from his book Speed and Politics, where for a moment it stops being a cog in the technical machine and itself becomes a motor, machine of attack. In other words, a producer of speed. And I think they had achieved a tremendous success, the opposition, with this sort of street warfare. I think the president was asserting that actually, the street does not belong to anybody. I can just as well go and speak to the street in a different manner. Kenya's Uchumi Supermarket says there are many suitors for their stake. We have given ourselves the next 3 months up to August to conclude everything, said Julius Kipling-Titch. Nairobi Oil shares up 0.39% so far this year. The NSE 20 is down 3.18% so far this year. National Bank's Q1 net profit dropped 33%. Non-performing loans rose 143.7% year on year to 17 billion shillings. A big number. The big news yesterday was really about Standard Chartered and reporting very strong Q1 numbers. They were bulked up, earnings plain and simple. EPS, Q1 EPS up 42.735%. They've surely been a big beneficiary of the deposit flight to quality, something that central bankers previously alluded to as well. And they've taken a pretty cautious provisioning policy, which is well to the right in Patrick Chirogi's new normal continuum. So these are really strong results, and the clue was there when the CEO Bill Winters visited with the head of Middle East and Africa, Sunil Kaushal, and Lamine, and they went to see the president. And at the dinner afterwards that they held, which I was at, I was sitting next to Sunil, very interesting, erudite individual, and Bill was speaking about how this was a jewel in the Standard Chartered crown, and really that was a clue to this performance. CFC Standard was very strong yesterday, up 8.19%. KenGen, currently conducting a rights issue, closed unchanged at 6 shillings 50 cents, which is below the rights issue price. And it's worth picking up because even after the rights dilution, we're looking at a P of 4.5. And somehow it's got queered, and the pitch has got queered. But fundamentally, I think you find liquidity events give you a big opportunity. This might be one of them, and I expect a lot of foreign investors to pile in through this moment. And then EABL rallied 0.33% to close at a fresh 2016 high of 300. It traded 255,800 shares. It surged 9.89% in 2016. It's a deserved bullish outlier in the Securities Exchange. I thank Mr. and Mrs. Ireland for dinner last week. And the MD of EABL is exuding confidence. He's gotten a lot right. And I think the share price is yet to catch up with that fact. And that period of catch-up should send the price vaulting over 300 and probably up to 330. So, not to forget Mindspeak. I hope to see you there.